Wait, what? Well, okay then. I don't normally ship villains with anyone, honestly. There are exceptions, don't get me wrong, but it's just kind of one of those things I never got into. So when I heard about the Reflection series in the comic books for MLP, it was confusing to say the least. It opened up possibilities of more mirrors for more things. Maybe we'll get a gender bend episode. Or comic series. No big deal. Maybe both. Sombra and Celestia. Good or bad? Let's talk about it. I think it's important to mention that I'm not talking about the Sombra that's in our universe, as we have no past with him. Now we talk about the comic first, before we get into the ship. Basically, it's about how there's another mirror that leads to a different world separate from the EQG universe, where what or whoever is bad in the normal Equestria is good in the other Equestria and vice versa. Celestia and Luna can't take care of themselves because reasons, after many shenanigans from a fight scene that somehow affects only our Celestia and Luna because reasons, and then more exposition happens and fights and even having this new Sombra turn into the dark side. Then we get happily ever after. I'm going to say this right now, this characterization is laughable. This is literally the only comic that I've read for myself, and by Celestia Sombra, it's hilarious. We may not know much about what Celestia and Luna are like when they're younger, or when they're completely alone, or when they're not talking about something that could threaten Equestria, but I'm getting ahead of myself. This isn't a comic review, this is a ship review. Good Sombra from the Reflections arc is just an all-around good guy, humble, selfless, self-sacrificing, caring, smart, and loving, showing all the good traits of a leader. Though he is a bit of a flat character. The only thing wrong with him is that he's got no offensive magic. Though you could say the same for Celestia. Never mind! Celestia is also kind, regal, selfless, caring, intelligent, humble, patient, stern, as well as able to take a joke. She's not all powerful though, from what we've seen in the show. As far as we know, she's ruling the kingdom okay. But I still think there's a need for a hostile takeover. Let's start with the pros, shall we? They are both royalty for starters. I will say that this point might seem arbitrary, but I say discuss it for a second. They can relate to each other not just through dancing and hanging out, but also through their position as royalty. They can understand the strife and responsibility that the other is facing as rulers of entire kingdoms. They can spark conversation in which can lead to eventual relationship as they develop. Even though people encourage the opposite attracts pairings, many pairings, no matter how seemingly opposite, have at least 3 or more things in common with one another. Though Celestia and Good Sombra come from opposite worlds, they do have a lot in common other than their personalities. As much as we would like to say that couples that have the opposites attract appeal always work, we all know that's not always the case. Celestia and Good Sombra have a lot in common, to the point where they're made for each other. Not just literally, but emotionally. I feel like these two could have began as friends and worked their way up to a nicely formed relationship. Their interactions remind me a lot of a long-distance relationship who don't really get to see each other very often. But even then, they try to make it work as much as they can. Though I do want to know, why isn't Good Sombra going through the mirror to balance everything out? Wouldn't that make everything better, you know, balance and all that? There's something about making the relationship work that's just relatable to every pony regardless of who you are. If your parents don't approve of a different rate, if your love seems unrealistic, you can relate to this in some degree. So what do you do to try to keep seeing each other if you can't?
Make it work.
Throughout every flashback, we see that these two are trying to make these short meetings as meaningful and last as long as they can without causing harm to their kingdoms. They make time for each other so they don't feel like they're slipping away. Both parties make an effort to do something different for their visits, from dancing to making little wishes of things that aren't totally foreshadowing anything at all. Yeah, totally not foreshadowing. Nothing at all. Nothing. Nope. Seriously, who writes wishes like this? Alright, what are some of the drawbacks from this? No, again, I'm not used to the comic writing for MLP, so this might just be their depiction of every pony in the comic, because of civil liberties, like Avatar: The Last Airbender's comic series might have. Honestly, while reading for this video, I honestly felt like there's a pattern for MLP writers in accordance to writing most young couples and unmarried couples. Younger couples usually are, well, very too perfect for each other, or just too perfect in general. And King Sombra and Celestia are no exception to this. They honestly don't feel like a realistic couple to me. They're kind of like Shining Armor and Cadence, except one has a personality and the other doesn't. They don't seem to have anything in common other than, oh, you're royalty, I'm royalty, I like hanging out with you, and vice versa, I'm totally in love. I mean, even lovers on their honeymoon stage have a fight or two, but they just act like they're a bunch of love-sick 12-year-olds. I can give them the excuse that they don't have really a whole lot of time to see each other because of the whole balancing thing, but yeah, even though we see a lot of interactions with these two, we don't really get to see much faults in their stars. From a narrative point of view, it's kind of bland and non-realistic to me. Okay, it's not what you think. I don't hate the character himself, but I do think there's a lack of any personality. He doesn't really have any flaws to work with, no challenges that Celestia can help him with, unlike her, who has loneliness and guilt of banishing her own sister. Remember when I said that this pairing seemed too perfect just a second ago? Yeah, he's part of that reason. He's just too perfect. He has so little flaws with him other than he's too good. I feel like after a certain amount of time they would just break up after just being bored, having nothing to talk about or say other than royal duties, let's party. Yeah, this isn't so much a con as much as just something that's always bothered me about this pairing. What about our Sombra? Does this mean that since he's dead, he's now sent to heaven, or does that mean he still lives because of Deus Ex Machina, and he's just wandering around Equestria as a good unicorn? I know that these are, in fact, different dimensions, and that not everything in one world is like the other. For example, the elements of harmony is on one side, and the other doesn't have the elements of harmony. Trixie is an alicorn for some reason, and no one has been banished. I have seen Voice of Reason talk about this lightly, how our Sombra died literally, and then the alternate Sombra died metaphorically. But it doesn't make much sense because one such pony still exists while the other does not. So overall, my thoughts on this pairing was that this is really boring. You know how a lot of reviewers have said Shining Armor and Cadence have almost no personality and are just there for the purpose of making more toys. In a cartoon that's made to advertise toys? Well, I actually think that that pairing is much better than this pointless pairing. At least in the pairing, Shining Cadence has a purpose to serve, both narratively and financially, but Sombra and Celestia are just pointless. At most, I can really see them as friends, but that's it. I should be saying that they don't have any chemistry, but they do. I should be saying how they don't have much things in common, but they do. This is one of those things where the pairing on its own was written too much into the friend zone. This doesn't really make me feel any sparks because there's nothing interesting to comment on. This has been your future evil overlord, Crimson Glow, and I need some Tale of a Shadow in my life.